Imagine a morning where peace is not easily shaken. Even when someone criticizes you, even when an unexpected problem appears, even when the world around you feels loud and rushed, there is still a quiet steadiness within you. Not because life has suddenly become easier, but because your mind has found a firm place to stand. Many of us spend our entire lives trying to control circumstances. We hope other people will change. We hope things will go our way. We hope life will become less difficult. But in the teachings of the Buddha, peace is not found outside of us. Peace is cultivated through the way we see and respond to whatever arises. When the mind is untrained, a single word can be enough to throw us off balance. One negative thought can carry us very far away. But when the mind is gently guided in the right direction, those same things no longer hold the same power. So if you are ready to take responsibility for your inner calm and ensure that nothing can disturb it, continue listening to these 10 Buddhist principles, because they may be exactly what you have been searching for. Lesson 1. Live with an inner anchor, so you are not swept away. When a day begins, and we do not know what we are living for, the mind is easily shaken. A passing criticism is enough to make us doubt ourselves. A compliment can lift us up and then immediately bring the fear of losing it. Pressure from work, family, and society slowly piles up. Not because these things are too big, but because inside us there is not yet a firm enough anchor to stand still amid all movement. Many people believe that an inner anchor comes from ambition. They think that when they achieve more, when they gain status, when they are recognized, the mind will finally be at ease. But in the teachings of the Buddha, an anchor is not found in becoming someone in the eyes of others. An anchor is found in clearly understanding what matters most to us and being willing to live in alignment with that each day. When the mind has no direction, everything feels heavy. Even small things are enough to exhaust us. We react strongly to the words of others, not necessarily because they are wrong, but because we do not know where we stand. Without an anchor, the mind is like a boat drifting in the middle of a river. Any wave can push us far away from ourselves. The Buddha taught that each person has their own path. No one can live our life for us, and no one can decide the value of our life except ourselves. There is a mindful reminder that has been passed down. Your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart to give yourself to it. When we recognize our own path and place our whole heart into it, the praise and criticism from outside gradually lose their weight. An inner anchor does not need to be grand. Sometimes it is simply the intention to live kindly without harming others. Sometimes it is the wish to keep the mind calm amid constant change. When we know what is essential, we no longer have to chase every expectation. We work not to prove ourselves, but to live in accordance with the values we have chosen. The application of this lesson is very simple. Each morning before allowing the world to enter the mind, remind yourself of one most important thing. Do not let the day begin with worry or haste. When the mind has an anchor, we step into life more lightly. Life still brings challenges, but we are no longer easily swept away. We still face difficulties, but we do not lose ourselves. That anchor is quietly there like the ground beneath our feet. It does not need to be seen by anyone, yet it supports every step we take with mindfulness and steady strength. Lesson 2. When the mind does not believe words, pain does not arise. Once we have an inner anchor, the mind begins to realize that not everything that happens has the power to hurt us. Much of the suffering in life does not come from events themselves, but from the way we react to them. When someone speaks harshly, we often believe the pain appears immediately. But if we look more closely, the decisive moment is not in the words themselves, but in whether we believe them or not. The moment we repeat those words in our mind and attach them to ourselves, pain begins to take shape. If we do not believe them and do not bring them inside, those words are only sounds and then they fade away. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is something very important: the space between stimulus and response. This space may be small, but it is enough to transform our entire experience. When we do not see this space, we react out of habit, out of old emotions and old wounds. But when we recognize this space, we begin to have freedom. Anger is often seen as a natural reaction. But the Buddha reminds us that anger itself is what causes suffering. You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. When we are angry, we say things we later regret. When we are angry, we act in ways that damage relationships. The original situation may be very small, but a heated reaction makes it heavy. No one can touch our peace unless we give them that power. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means knowing how to protect our inner space. We still hear, we still see, we still understand, but we do not let the first emotion lead the way. The practice of this lesson is very simple, but requires patience. When something makes us uncomfortable, pause for a moment. Do not react immediately. Do not rush to believe the first emotion. Breathe slowly to let the body soften. Then observe the emotion that is present without judgment. When we no longer rush to believe emotions, pain naturally weakens. We begin to live more freely in a world full of change. Peace is no longer fragile but becomes a place we can return to whenever the outside world stirs. And from that place, we walk more steadily amid praise and criticism without being carried away by them. Life continues to move, but the mind has learned how to stand still in each present moment with awareness and lightness. Lesson 3. Keeping the mind at peace in the face of insult. After learning not to give power to the words of others, we take a deeper step. This step is learning not to take insult into ourselves. In daily life, there are moments when we are spoken to harshly, treated rudely, or judged unfairly. The natural reaction of the mind is to shrink into defense or to strike back. But in the teachings of the Buddha, an insult does not automatically become pain. It becomes pain only when we carry it inside and hold on to it. Look closely at the person who is insulting you. It is rare that this person is at peace. Most often they are angry, exhausted, under pressure, or carrying a form of suffering that has not yet been seen. Their words are not born from clarity, but from inner instability. When we understand this, we begin to see insult from a different perspective. Not because we are wrong, but because they are hurting. When we cannot see this, we easily merge the words of others with our own sense of worth. A single, unmindful sentence can make us doubt ourselves for an entire day. But when we realize that an insult is the burden of the one who speaks it, we no longer need to carry it for them. We have the right to let it remain where it was created. The Buddha taught that hatred cannot be ended by hatred. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. When we respond with anger, we only extend the cycle of suffering not only for others, but for ourselves. When we choose not to take in the insult, that cycle begins to stop. Not reacting does not mean accepting harm. Not reacting is not weakness. It is a conscious choice. It is choosing peace over the need to be right or to win. We can speak up when necessary. We can set clear boundaries. But we do not need to let our mind be burned by the emotions of others. The practice of this lesson lies in awareness. When you hear words that make you uncomfortable, pause and ask where these words are coming from. Do they truly speak about you, or are they reflecting the suffering of the other person? Simply seeing this already lightens the weight of the insult. When we do not bring insult home, the mind becomes lighter. We do not replay those words again and again. We do not argue silently inside. We do not carry anger into other peaceful moments of the day. Peace is no longer fragile because we have learned not to pick up what does not belong to us. And from there we walk through life with an open heart that is no longer easily wounded. Lesson 4. Do not explain live rightly. After learning not to take insult into ourselves, we encounter a more subtle challenge when others speak badly about us. There are moments when we are misunderstood, accused of things we did not do, and given no chance to defend ourselves. Rumors travel faster than truth, and silence is sometimes seen as weakness. In those moments, the mind easily wavers because we want to be understood and treated fairly. The natural reaction is to explain, justify, or argue back. We want people to know who we are and that we are not what the rumors say. But the more we explain, the more confused the mind becomes and the longer the story continues. In the teachings of the Buddha, the words of others do not define who we are. The value of a person is not found in what is said about them, but in how they live and act each day. There are times when no one stands up for us. No one speaks on our behalf. This can feel lonely, yet it is precisely in this silence that we are invited to return and look at how we are living. Buddhism teaches that karma is not created by rumors, but by actions. What we do with body and mind leaves a clearer mark than any story that is spread. When we live rightly, negative talk gradually loses its place. When we keep the mind upright, truth is given time to reveal itself. The Buddha taught speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness follows. When words and actions arise from a clear heart, the result is inner ease, not outer victory. Living instead of explaining does not mean accepting injustice. It is the choice not to let the mind be pulled into the whirlpool of gossip. We can speak when needed without losing composure. We know when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence here is not avoidance, but trust in the path we are walking. When we are spoken ill of, we can ask ourselves one simple question: do these words align with how I am living? If they do not, we do not need to carry them. If there is any truth, we can learn and adjust. In this way, negative talk is no longer a threat, but becomes a mirror. The practice of this lesson lies in patience and steadiness. Each day we live kindly, act with awareness, and keep the mind clear. Lesson 5. Care for the mind. So life becomes lighter. After learning not to let the words or actions of others control us, we return to something very basic, which is caring for the mind each day. In the teachings of the Buddha, the mind is the foundation of all experience. Whatever fills the mind is how the world appears. When the mind is full of worry, the world feels heavy. When the mind is full of resentment, everything takes on a gray tone. And when the mind holds peace, even if circumstances have not changed, we are still able to breathe more lightly. The Buddha often used very familiar images to speak about the mind. The mind is like a garden. Each thought is a seed. There are seeds of understanding, love, and patience. But there are also seeds of fear, doubt, and anger. A skillful gardener cannot prevent weeds from appearing, but they do not allow weeds to take over the entire garden. They know how to observe and nurture what needs to grow. Negative thoughts are the same. They are not our fault. They arise from habit, from memory, from past experiences. But if we are not mindful, they grow very quickly. A tired thought repeated many times becomes a familiar state. Then we look at life through a heavy lens without realizing it. The Buddha reminded us the mind is everything. What you think, you become. This is not meant to make us afraid of negative thoughts, but to help us understand the power of nurturing the mind. What we repeat each day gradually becomes the person we live with. Therefore, caring for the mind is not forcing ourselves to think positively, but learning to choose what is worthy of being nourished. The practice of this lesson lies in gentle observation. When a tiring thought appears, we do not need to push it away nor chase after it. We simply recognize that it is present. When we stop feeding it with repetition or excessive analysis, it naturally weakens. Like weeds that are not watered, they slowly wither. Caring for the mind also means learning to bring wholesome seeds into our garden. A moment of slow breathing, a kind action, a gentle word toward ourselves. Very small things repeated consistently can change the inner climate. When we know how to care for the mind, the outer world no longer exhausts us so easily. We are no longer swept away by every thought that appears. We begin to have space to choose our response. The inner garden gradually becomes more open, and from there, life becomes lighter. Not because difficulties disappear, but because we have learned to care for the place where all experience begins. Lesson 6. Moving beyond fear and shame. After learning how to care for the inner garden of the mind, we begin to see a deeper layer of suffering, which is fear and shame. These two emotions often do not come from the present moment, but from old stories the mind has grown used to telling. We fear being judged, fear being rejected, fear not being accepted. We feel shame about choices made in the past, about things we did or things we failed to do. These stories repeat again and again, causing us to shrink and gradually lose our sense of freedom. In the teachings of the Buddha, fear and shame are not the essence of who we are. They are only states of mind that arise and pass away. When we identify ourselves with them, we believe we are weak, flawed, or not good enough. But when we look more deeply, we see that they are simply thoughts formed from memory and old conditions. We are not the story the mind is telling. Many fears arise from being overly concerned with how others see us. We imagine that people are constantly watching and judging us. In reality, each person is occupied with their own worries. When we realize this, fear begins to loosen. Shame is similar. It keeps us trapped in the past. But the past has already passed and exists only in memory. We cannot change what happened, but we can change how we carry it in the mind. Buddhism invites us to practice a very gentle form of separation, not denying emotions, but also not allowing them to define us. When fear appears, we acknowledge its presence. When shame arises, we see it with understanding. Simply staying with the breath and observing the mind allows these emotions to gradually lose their weight. We are no longer pulled along by old stories. The Buddha once said, even death is not to be feared by one who has lived wisely. When we live with mindfulness and understanding, even death is not frightening. Then judgments and old memories no longer have the power to bind us. Living wisely does not mean never making mistakes, but learning not to punish ourselves forever. Moving beyond fear and shame is a process. Each time we do not run from emotion, but remain present and observe, we return freedom to ourselves. When we no longer fully believe the story of the mind, we begin. Lesson 7. Everyone is a teacher. As we gradually move beyond fear and shame, another door opens on the path of practice, which is how we see the people around us. In life, there are people who make us feel comfortable, and there are also people who make us feel irritated, annoyed, and tired. Our usual reaction is to want to avoid such people. But in the teachings of the Buddha, it is precisely those who make us uncomfortable who become our most important teachers. When you encounter someone who irritates you, look closely at what is happening inside. The issue is not always with them. Very often, discomfort arises because they touch an area within us that is not yet healed. It may be impatience, pride, or a deep need for recognition. That person is simply a mirror reflecting something we have not yet seen clearly in ourselves. Buddhism teaches that every encounter has meaning. No one appears in our life by chance. Each person brings a lesson. Those who are kind teach us to open our hearts. Those who are difficult teach us patience. Those who hurt us teach us to understand suffering more deeply. When we shift our perspective, relationships are no longer burdens, but opportunities for practice. The essential practice in this lesson is patience. Patience does not mean suppression or endurance. Patience is the ability to stay with our emotions without rushing to react. When someone says or does something that makes us uncomfortable, we can pause and observe the inner response. The heart beats faster. The body tightens. Thoughts of defense arise. Simply seeing these without judgment is enough. When we observe our own reactions, we begin to learn the deepest lesson. We recognize what we are carrying. We see the habitual patterns of the mind, and in that moment of clear seeing, freedom begins to appear. We no longer react unconsciously, but respond with choice. The other person remains the same, but we have changed. Lesson 8. Living with clear ethical boundaries. After learning to see everyone as a teacher, we begin to realize that for the mind to truly rest, it needs an even deeper foundation, which is the way we live each day. In the teachings of the Buddha, ethics are not rules meant to restrain human beings. Ethics are a place where the mind can rest. When we live rightly, we do not need to worry about hiding or fearing consequences. The mind becomes lighter because there is no longer inner conflict. Many people think freedom means doing whatever one wants. But Buddhism sees freedom differently. Freedom means not being burdened by guilt, not being driven by fear, not being pulled back by unmindful actions of the past. When we live without clear boundaries, the mind is always uneasy. We fear being exposed. We fear being judged. We fear what may come later. This fear is what prevents the mind from resting. The Buddha taught very simple principles so that people can live in harmony with others and with themselves. Do not harm life. Do not take what is not given. Do not cause suffering in relationships. Do not speak dishonestly. Do not allow the mind to be clouded by things that take away clarity. These principles are not meant to create perfection. They help reduce the causes of suffering. When we do not harm others, the mind does not carry regret. When we live truthfully, we do not need to remember different words for different situations. When we maintain clarity, we see clearly what we are doing. Each principle removes a burden from the mind. Without having to think too much, the mind remains at ease because it knows it is not going against its deepest values. Living with clear ethical boundaries does not make life rigid. On the contrary, it creates a sense of safety. Like walking on a road with guardrails, we can move more lightly, knowing we are less likely to fall. When we clearly know what should not be done, we do not have to struggle every day. Energy can be used to nourish rather than to defend. When we live rightly, we are not afraid. Not because life has no risks, but because we are no longer afraid of ourselves. We trust our choices. We trust that even as circumstances change, we still have a clear direction. At that point, the mind has a place to rest. This lesson invites us to look again at how we are living, not to judge, but to understand. Whenever the mind feels uneasy, we can ask whether we have strayed from a value. When actions are adjusted, the mind naturally settles. Ethics, then, are no longer an obligation, but become a quiet support for each step we take. There is a beautiful reminder that has been passed down. In the end, these things matter most. How well did you love? How fully did you live? How deeply did you let go? When we see everyone as a teacher, we learn to love more deeply. Not only those who are easy to love, but also those who are difficult. We live more fully because every interaction becomes part of the path of awakening. And we learn to let go of the need to be right, to be superior, or to win. Seeing everyone as a teacher does not mean accepting every behavior. We still need boundaries. We can still leave when necessary, but we do not carry resentment. We take the lesson and release the rest. When we can do this, the mind becomes wider and lighter. When we no longer see others as obstacles, we begin to see them as those helping us grow. And from there, every meeting, whether pleasant or difficult, becomes a step on the path back to deep inner peace. Lesson 9. Living in harmony with nature. Once there is a clear ethical foundation, the mind gradually becomes more stable. Yet there remains a very deep source of suffering that many people do not recognize, which is resistance to change. In the teachings of the Buddha, impermanence is the nature of life. Everything is born, then changes, and then passes away. When we try to hold on to what cannot be held or resist what is happening, suffering naturally arises. We often think suffering comes from events themselves, but many times suffering comes from not accepting those events. We want everything to remain as it was. We want people not to change. We want emotions to stay only in pleasant states. When life does not move according to our wishes, the mind becomes tense. That tension itself is suffering. The Buddha often taught through images drawn from nature. Look at a tree in the wind. The tree does not stiffen itself to resist the wind. It bends with the wind and then returns to its place. Because of this, the tree does not break. If it tried to stand rigid and fight the force of the wind, it would be easily damaged. Human beings are the same. When we soften in the face of change, we remain standing. When we become rigid, we break more easily. Living in harmony with nature does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It is a deep understanding that there are things beyond our control. We can care, we can adjust, but we cannot force life to stand still. When we understand this, the mind struggles less. Energy is no longer wasted on futile resistance. Accepting change is a practice that takes time. It is not acceptance through reasoning, but through experience. Each time something changes, observe the reaction in the mind. Fear, regret, anger. There is no need to push these emotions away. Simply recognize that they arise because the mind is clinging to an old image. When this is seen, attachment begins to loosen. There is a profound teaching of the Buddha. Just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past. The snake does not carry its old skin because it no longer fits. If it did, it could not continue to live. Human beings are the same. When we carry the past old roles and old stories, we make ourselves heavy. Letting go does not mean forgetting, but not allowing the past to control the present. Living in harmony with nature is learning to walk in rhythm with life. When we are in harmony, we do not need to strain. When we are in harmony, the mind has space to breathe. We still act. We still make effort. But we do not resist what cannot be changed. Peace does not come from life standing still, but from no longer resisting the flow. This lesson invites us to practice softness a little each day. When change appears, remind yourself that this is the nature of life. When the mind stops resisting, suffering lessens. And within that acceptance, a deep and gentle peace begins to arise. Lesson 10. Gratitude so nothing can break you. After learning to live in harmony with nature and no longer resist the flow of life, we arrive at a practice that is both very deep and very simple, which is gratitude. In the teachings of the Buddha, gratitude is not a fleeting emotion, but a state of mind. When the mind is grateful, it feels complete. And when the mind feels complete, it is no longer easily wounded by outer lack. Much human suffering begins with a sense of lacking. Lacking recognition, lacking safety, lacking love. When this sense of lack is present, the mind becomes fragile. A single word can cause pain. A single comparison can lead to self-doubt. But when gratitude arises, the mind is no longer searching. It returns to what is already present in this moment. Gratitude does not mean denying difficulty. We may still be facing challenges, loss, or uncertainty. Yet at the same time, we can recognize that we are still breathing, still have the chance to move forward, and still have unseen supports around us. When the mind recognizes this, energy shifts. We no longer see life through the eyes of a victim, but through the eyes of a learner. The Buddha taught that where the mind turns, life unfolds in that direction. When the mind turns toward lack, we always feel insufficient. When the mind turns toward gratitude, we see that we are being supported. There is a beautiful reminder. Let us rise up and be thankful. Rising up is not to fight life, but to see life with different eyes. Eyes of appreciation. Gratitude is the softest armor. It does not harden us. It does not distance us from others. Instead, it allows us to open while not easily falling. When we are grateful, we do not need to prove our worth. We do not need to compare. We do not need to cling to perfection. We stand firm because we feel enough. The practice of gratitude requires no complex ritual. Each day, we simply pause for a few moments to recognize something that is supporting us. A simple meal, someone who listens, a quiet morning. When we allow ourselves to see these things, the mind gradually changes. A sense of lack no longer occupies the entire inner space. When the mind is grateful, negative words carry less weight. Comparison loses its appeal. Fear of loss softens because we have learned to cherish the present. Nothing outside can easily break us when inside we already feel enough. This final lesson closes the journey back to inner strength. Not the strength to fight life, but the strength to stand steadily within it. When we are grateful, we no longer struggle. We are present. And within that presence, the deepest peace begins to spread. Through these 10 lessons, we are invited to look back at our own journey. Life does not become calm simply because we practice. The world does not grow gentler just because we wish it to. There are still changes, losses, misunderstandings, and moments of deep fatigue. But what has changed is that we are no longer drifting. We have found an inner anchor to return to whenever the mind is shaken. Nothing can affect you is not a promise that sadness will disappear. It is the ability to no longer give outer circumstances the power to decide our inner state. We still live in the world, we still feel joy and sorrow, but we do not lose awareness or inner steadiness. If as you listen you feel even a little lighter, take a moment to honor that feeling. And if you wish to continue nurturing balance, stay with this channel and share it with others.